Do you feel like they're teetering, or do you sort of channel a different emotion for each individual piece?
I think I probably channel a different emotion for each individual, but it involves a lot of wrestling and swearing.
Right. Welcome back to the Art Scene. This is Eric Beal with another exciting interview, this time with Erika Trotzig. Erika is a London-based artist that is showing in Special Relationships, the current show at the Torrance Art Museum. Erika's work uses found objects to deconstruct then reconstruct them into teetering sculptures, as a methodical approach on failure and what that means in our society at large. So, let's get to the interview.
I am a sculptor, and I work in 3D.
Yeah.
And I work a lot with, in a sense, kind of things which are unmonumental and unheroic in a sense. I'm interested in the kind of the idea of failure and collapse as an idea of resistance, a method of resistance in a sense, and a way of and also a method of exploring materials, metaphorical resonances of material. It's, what they carry with them in a sense. What people associate. It's almost like if you have a word, it always carries with it its kind of shadow and its opposite. And I feel that materials do that too, especially already used materials. So I use a lot of recycled materials. I use found objects, not so much objects, but found materials, found colours, found things. And I kind of feel that they bring with them a whole set of associations and ideas which can kind of evoke a lot more than just they bring with them a history, basically. So that's where I start, in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what in your background sort of inspired you to use these found materials and remove them from their original context?
It depends on how far you go back. So I come from, my training was in fashion. And so I worked in fashion for a while. I had my own label. But it was all very anti-fashion in a sense, and very I went to St. Martin's in the 90s. I had a label in the early noughties. I hated fashion and all what it stood for, but I was interested in clothing and identity, and I was interested in deconstruction, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what it was that I actually wanted to do. And in the end, I decided that actually I had tried to do fine art all along, but thinking that I kind of went into fashion thinking that it could be art, realized that the fashion industry was not kind of particularly didn't want that. And the reason why, I think I come from a family of artists.
Okay.
So so I kind of spent a long time trying not to join the family firm, basically.
Right.
So my dad was a painter, my sister is a painter, my mother was a writer. So it's sort of so I think a lot of what I do is I think also in relationship to that. Where do you sit when you grow up within this kind of milieu, and how does that affect you, and how can you question that in a sense? And I think all of those things kind of has led to what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
I also teach. I've taught fashion for a long time. I spent a long time telling all my students that they should be doing sculpture.
Really?
And in the end, I kind of thought, what, maybe I should kind of think about what it is I'm saying.
Right.
So that's where I'm from, really.
Through your work in fashion, it was seeing how the industry was and wanting to deconstruct that and work your own path. Do you feel like growing up in a family of artists also?
I think so. I think I came into fashion with the mentality of an artist, as in I wasn't doing stuff for a customer, I found that very difficult. I was doing stuff for me, but they happened to be, sculptures that were on other people's bodies.
Sure.
So it was, in a sense, wearable sculpture, and I think I found it very difficult to be a designer in a sense, and doing, But at the same time, as I've started making sculpture outside of the body, in a sense, with using the body as a starting point, in a sense, I think that the idea of function and the idea of non-functional objects have been very interesting, because obviously there's a kind of a dichotomy there, between the idea of the functional and the non-functional, which always has in a sense really fascinated me. What is functional? How do you subvert it, in a sense? And I think that the idea is the idea of the dysfunction, I think is something that really fascinates me. That's what the dysfunction does, and what it makes you think of, and what it says about our times, in a sense. I don't think my works, or in a sense, they've never been overtly political. I'm not sort of somebody who stands on barricades and see myself as an activist. But I do think that what I do has political overtones. I think I question, I'm definitely questioning the kind of, the consumption, overconsumption, the power structures, the kind of, all these kind of things. But I'm not there to I'm not coming up with solutions.
Something that was on your website, you described your practice as the notion of failure, and failure as a political statement, as a protest, as a methodology.
Yeah.
How does that then translate into individual pieces of artwork?
I think maybe it's more, it's individual. I think it's the methods of making. So I think through making, and I question the ideas of making, in a sense. I think I do things which are terribly badly made. They're very intentionally badly made, but it's always teetering. It's always kind of, I'm forever wrestling with things. My sort of carpentry skills are, childish, and I don't care. I kind of push it as far as I can. And I'm interested in that sense of the teetering, the kind of like, is this going to fail? Is it not? Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it, so things that sits kind of in between. I'm not going to use liminal, but it is, there is that sort of, and I think that with this kind of, in a sense, critical making, that carries with it questions. It carries with it my questions. In a sense, I kind of see it as a kind of problem solving in a design kind of way. In a sense, I set myself a problem or a situation. I combine these things, materials, methods of making, and I set this up, and I see what happens. And more often than not, it doesn't. And sometimes the failures are things that I show, and sometimes I just have to continue again, so it's a continuous, It is that sense of, but I think for me that the idea of progress, especially over the last, I came of age in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, and, the notion of the kind of neoliberalism and this kind of like progress and relentless kind of was something that was kind of a relentless individualism and all these kind of things. So some things that kind of has been almost, bred into my generation very, very, and I'm a product of it in a sense, but I do feel that I have always questioned it. I've always felt that, what does that mean? What does it mean to always strive forward and have to go upwards and go to, and I think a lot of what I do is to create pieces which are, they're kind of futile. They're a bit sad. They're a bit silly. They're a bit, but they're also, take a lot of care of them.
Right.
There's a lot of care in my work, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody once said, it's like, oh yeah, you make these things and you treat them really badly, and then you and then you care about them,
Right.
and then you fix them. So there is that sort of sense of yeah, and I think that for me is political.
Right.
You know, that's where the kind of, I think it shows a different way, I guess. You know, I mean, you know, my works is not particularly commercial. You know, it's not particularly saleable. But it has huge resonances with people. People kind of look at what I do and they kind of come in and they always have like, oh my God, this makes me think of this. Or, oh my God, this makes me cry. Or, oh my, you know, so they have a vulnerability to them, which I think, well, I have been told that, which I think people kind of can somehow relate to and feel and kind of see something else in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was one particular art piece, one installation that I saw you had posted that you just wrote the caption installing/wrestling.
Yes.
And I was wondering, how do you feel when you're making an artwork? Do you feel like they're teetering, or do you sort of channel a different emotion for each individual piece?
I think I probably channel a different emotion for each individual, but it involves a lot of wrestling and swearing.
Right.
Because there's a lot of things where it's very physical, you know, because often I work with large things and I don't know if it's going to work. And often it involves a lot of wrestling, balancing, you know, and things turn out to be heavier than I think, and then I have to carry it around, and you know, so yes, wrestling is a good one. I think the physicality of that and the physicality of the work is also really important in a sense, because I think that because the starting point somehow is the body, you know, and the kind of, well, you know, from a kind of almost sort of phenomenological point of view, the experience of being in a body, you know, that is the kind of, and the body that never fits in, never is correct, never is right, never in this, in our society, bodies are very badly treated in one way or another, you know, it's a sort of, and it has historically been like that, you know, and so I think that sense of the wrestle and the physicality of it is really important to that, because it is engaging the body in the sculpture in a sense.
Right.
So they're kind of performative strangely, you know. I mean, I think my process of making is performative, even though I don't invite people to view that performance.
Right.
All the time, but you know, but there is definitely something about how I guess it's activating in a sense.
Do you feel like that maybe comes from using the used materials, the found objects in your artwork, that the objects themselves almost have their own life, so you're imparting your life, your labor into this new construction? I
think so. I think that, yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Absolutely. I think I think there's something, I don't know, there's quite an interesting book called Vibrant Matter, which talks about thing power, and you know, this idea of thing power and of the agency of materials, and that is something that I have totally embraced in a sense. Well, I believe it in a sense, you know, because, and I think that it becomes, the making becomes a setting up of a situation in a sense, and then letting that unfold.
Right.
And I often, most of the times, I don't have a clue how it's going to end up. I mean, sometimes sometimes I use kind of a starting point of an architect, you know, the idea of an architectural fragment. I've been thinking around follies, for example, you know, which are kind of like these strange architectural phenomenon, in a sense, where you build something that it's meant to look like something, but it's completely functionless, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Follies are, you know, like little pavilions that they had in sort of, you know, and in on, it's a kind of very romantic idea. People kind of built their own ruins and things like
Okay.
that, you know, and so follies. And sometimes they mask something like a pump house or something like that. So there is a
I
hidden
see.
function, you know.
Uh-huh.
But often, so kind of I like the idea of the folly, but I also like the idea of the architectural fragment. I mean, sometimes I love somebody like Piranesi. I have a sort of, but you know, this idea of the ruin, and I kind of have that in the back of my mind. But usually, the work comes out quite bodily anyway. You know, it's a sort of, you know, they often sit somewhere between a pillar and a body, you know,
Yeah.
or something, you know, or in terms of the kind of the stairs, you know, staircases and you know, the stairwells and things like that, that I see them as a kind of, you know, like a passageway. So they become quite sort of, you know, bodily in a way as well. So it's a sort of, so yeah, so I guess somewhere between bodies and architecture, you know, and the kind of relationship between bodies and architecture kind of is somewhere, it sits in the back of my mind when I work.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because this particular show at the Torrance Art Museum is pairing some Los Angeles artists with London-based artists. And your work is in conversation with that artist that's sort of a pairing. The artist that I believe your work is in conversation with is Stephanie Sherwood, who also works a lot with found objects, and her practice also really brings in that sense of being in a body and what that entails, the rigidity of society versus our, you know, fleshy bodies.
Absolutely. And I think there is something, I think that the resistance to the fleshy body that kind of permeates history in a sense, you know, where, you know, the ideal beauty is as some sort of white marble object, you know, preferably male, you know, is, you know, doesn't give much sort of it doesn't give much tolerance to what the real bodies are. Right. And, you know, and I think that, and that experience of always being in something that isn't acting or doing or looking or being in the right way, I think is really this kind of starting point of what I do. And then everything else is kind of related to it in a sense, you know, because for me, I mean, buildings and the built environment is completely related to the body, you know,
Right.
you know, and memories and, you know, I mean, so it's a kind of, so it sort of starts there. And because you can never entirely, the body's kind of always failing in one way or another, you know, either from how society views it or physically, you know, what it does and how you test it, you know, there is that's where the idea of the failure sort of also comes in, and where the idea of the failure as a mode of resistance in a sense kind of comes in, you know, and yeah, and you spend a lot of time questioning, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting with Stephanie. I think it is quite it's not a unique experience in a sense. So I think a lot of, you know, it is that sense of feeling that you need to relate to it.
Right. Would you be able to then share the series you have here on display at the museum for special relationships?
Yes. Well, so this is the staircase. So it's called Untitled, and then brackets stairs, just in case you don't know what it is. I thought I quite like these kind of like you know, having fun with titles. But in this case, I mean, the staircase has started sort of, I mean, from this notion of trying to do something that really sat, that it has this idea of function. I mean, but staircases also has this. I mean, they have, everyone kind of goes, oh, staircase to heaven, or sort of, it's about progress. You go from one place to another. It's about we're stepping stones. We're always talking about this progress things. So this is a staircase that really doesn't work. You can't walk on it. It'll fall apart. The kind of the steps are yielding, so they're really soft. It doesn't work. And also, then there's the idea of kind of the old mattresses and the foam, and what that brings with it, sort of like other people's memories, other people's ideas, other bodies, the absence of bodies in a sense. But really, it is. I mean, I just see it as a sort of this like thing for you to have a think about. I mean, it's comical, but it's also quite sad. They resonate a lot. People find them evocative, and I keep redoing them or remaking them, so I have this a series. This is like number 5, or I haven't even kept sort of but and they're always different, because they're always made in situ with the kind of materials from the place around. So it kind of also brings in the space where I'm at, in a sense, and that's what's been really interesting actually with working with this particular piece. And because it was actually Stephanie who found the materials and helped me find. I mean, I provided a list, and she did a fantastic job in finding. And so it became also a sort of a kind of a collaboration in that sense. And I think that having the materials from LA and from here means that it feels like it's quite grounded here, in a sense. It has an LA kind of feeling.
Yeah. So I guess sort of coming towards the end, a lot of your work focuses on bringing together that, if it's an in situ piece, if it's created one at a time, using the location and focusing on a little bit of the past and the now. Do you have a vision for how your artwork will evolve in the future, or do you think about the future when you're making these works?
I don't think I do. I think that the future. Well, I guess the future is always in us, because the next moment is there. You know, but I think I am very much in the moment when I make. I think they might point towards the future, because they might point to something which is where we maybe don't feel that everything has to be shiny and bright all the time, and they kind of, but I don't think I don't set out to create, there's lots of artists who kind of, are actively trying to create alternative futures. And I think I'm more of a kind of like putting some groundworks down for that. But I don't, my vision is not that, in a sense. I think it's very much a reflection of the now. Yeah. And a critique of the now, I think. But there are lots of clever people who can think about the future from that.
Yeah, we'll let them do that.
Yeah, we'll let them do that. I'm in the now. Yeah. And I think, one of the things that's really important to me, and I think it's very tactile what I do, and it is very here. It is very, very, it's not anti-technological, but it's definitely something that is not using, I use things which are for real, in real life, that and that's a very conscious decision,
Yeah.
It's a sort of, I want things because I believe in thing power.
That's a great way to conclude then. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to interview with us.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you everyone for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. For more information on Erika Trotzig, you can visit erikatrotzig.com. To see the upcoming shows at Torrance Art Museum, that's at torranceartmuseum.com. And for more information from us, you can visit theartscene.com. All links in the description down below. Until next time.